Today we're going to look at what may be the crown jewel of our collection, my 1938 Smith Wesson Registered Magnum, one of the first 5,200 revolvers that were ever chambered for what was then the groundbreaking .357 Magnum cartridge. It was a revolver born out of necessity, from the need for law enforcement to bring the gangsters of the 20s and 30s to heel. Join me as we look back at the development of this revolutionary handgun and explore why the Registered Magnum remains one of the most revered revolvers ever produced. John Dillinger. Babyface Nelson. Pretty Boy Floyd. Bonnie and Clyde. In the early 1930s, if you were an outlaw, you often held advantage over law enforcement, especially the peace officers and county sheriffs serving the small towns that so frequently became targets. Most officers carried a .38 Special revolver. While adequate for breaking up Saturday night bar fights, its standard 158 grain, lead, round-nosed bullet, traveling at roughly 850 feet per second, proved woefully inadequate against the realities of the gangster era. The heavy steel bodies of contemporary automobiles could stop or deflect those slow-moving bullets, and even automobile window glass often prevented them from reaching their target. Against the crude but increasingly common body armor worn by this new breed of highwaymen, the .38 Special offered little confidence to the officers whose lives depended on it. What law enforcement needed was more velocity. To answer that need, ammunition manufacturers introduced the high-pressure .38-44 cartridge. Designed to be fired from Smith & Wesson's large in-frame revolvers or from Colt's heavy single-action frame, these hot-loaded .38 rounds propelled their 158-grain bullet at roughly 1,150 feet per second, about 300 feet faster than the standard .38 Special. While an improvement, the criminals still held the upper hand. The real breakthrough came from the combined efforts of three legendary firearms figures: gun writer Elmer Keith, Smith & Wesson executive Douglas Wesson, and renowned ballistics expert Phil Sharp. The product of this collaboration would be the .357 Magnum cartridge. Using a case of the same diameter, but lengthened by slightly more than 1/8 of an inch, it was not simply a matter of increasing the amount of gunpowder in each cartridge. The powder type shifted to a more dense, slower-burning smokeless propellant. This allowed the .357 to safely generate nearly double the internal pressure and achieve much higher velocities than standard .38 loads. In reality, the longer case only served as a safety measure to prevent these high-pressure rounds from mistakenly being loaded in the weaker-bodied .38 Specials. The protruding shoulder of the longer .357 cartridges prevented the cylinder from closing and allowing the gun to fire. And the name Magnum? Originally, it had nothing to do with power or performance. Those associations came later. Instead, the name was borrowed from the world of wine. A Magnum bottle held twice the volume of a standard one, making it an apt metaphor for something larger and more substantial. Before long, however, Magnum would become synonymous with unrivaled ballistic performance. Once they had the cartridge, then Smith & Wesson went about the work of designing an all-new revolver around it, based upon its robust end frame. The result would be one of the most iconic firearms ever produced, the Smith & Wesson Registered Magnum. For $60, an individual, or more often a law enforcement agency, could order from the factory a revolver built to their exact specifications. Barrel lengths ranged from 3.5 to 8 3/4 inches, available in 1/4 inch increments. Because each revolver was essentially custom built, buyers could also select either a blued or nickel finish, choose from 13 different front sights, 6 different rear sights, and several hammer and grip styles. The level of customization didn't stop there. Buyers could specify the trigger pull weight for both single and double action firing, the exact distance at which the revolver would be sighted in, and whether the point of impact would correspond to a 12 o'clock hold, a 6 o'clock hold, or dead center on the target. In addition to the standard serial number found on every Smith & Wesson firearm, each of these first-generation .357 Magnums were engraved with a unique registration number that can be found on the frame yoke after the cylinder is swung open. That number corresponds to the original factory order, allowing the revolver to be traced back to its owner's custom specifications. Upon receipt of the revolver, you could complete and return a registration card to Smith & Wesson. In return, the company would issue an official registration certificate bearing the owner's name and address, the revolver's registration number, and a complete record of its custom specifications. Only about half of those roughly 5,200 Magnums had their registration cards sent in to receive that certificate. I learned about these revolvers years ago when I was thinking about buying my first .357. After hearing their history, I was hooked, and the more that I learned about the registered Magnum, the more I wanted to get my hands on one. The problem would be finding the right one. Depending on its condition, whether it had the original paperwork including the registration certificate, if there was the original box, or even the cardboard mailing tube for the certificate. Prices can run anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000. An original registration certificate alone can add another $1,500 or more to the gun's value. I had 2 requirements. First, I wanted a revolver with either a 4 or 5-inch barrel, and it had to have its original registration certificate. Add in finding one in really nice condition, and not many came available. And after a few years, one finally showed up at Rock Island Auction. It checked every box: a 5-inch registered Magnum, complete with its original registration certificate, and little sign of holster wear or mishandling. And that's the one that you see here today. This goes back to Smith & Wesson's old style pinned and recessed revolvers, where the frame would be made from one piece of steel, the barrel from another, then it would be screwed on, and a pin would hold it in place. Another feature introduced was the recessed cylinder. Engineers feared the higher pressures of the new .357 Magnum cartridge might cause the case rim to separate from the brass during firing. To help guard against this possibility, they machined each chamber so the cartridge rims sat flush with the rear face of the cylinder. In the end, these concerns proved unfounded, and Smith & Wesson discontinued the recessed cylinder design in the early 1980s. In the end, and after 4 years, Smith & Wesson abandoned its custom order program and shifted to the more profitable mass production of .357 Magnums with standardized features. That chapter, however, was also short-lived. In 1940, civilian production came to a halt as the company turned its attention to the war effort, devoting its manufacturing capacity to meeting the needs of the U.S. military. The icing on the cake is the history of this old revolver. It was ordered by Sheriff George Hoxie of the New London County, Connecticut Sheriff's Department. He ordered 12 of these for himself and his deputies. Mine is inscribed with NL County number 10. The Smith Wesson Registered Magnum, another classic from down at the old shooting shack.